and we have Austin with us, and
Hello. I have to
we're
make noise. If I don't make noise, I won't show up on the screen. So I had to shout when we were talking.
Perfect. So, Austin and I were talking about this about a month ago, about this kind of need to kind of review popular philosophy and, how that's relevant today, but also how we can radicalize these thoughts and push it forward. And so we wanted to start off with a first session that, is open, where you guys could come in and give us feedback, and we can try to figure out where we're going to go with the next step. Austin, do you think you could share a little bit about what you're doing, some thoughts and whatnot?
Sure. I mean, a bit of backstory for people who don't know us, which is probably no one who's watching this. It's probably just our buddies so far. But, the virus will spread, hence patient zero terminology. But Lewis and I know each other from Cairo, where we would chase the Egyptians around Tahrir Square and pretend it was our revolution too for a little bit. And to put it bluntly, but one of the things is, as much as we agree about almost everything when it comes to actual policy, I think, in terms of like what should happen in the real world, we're both very progressive. We both want, the rich to have less and the poor to have more. We both want, personal freedom. We both want that. But the philosophical backgrounds we have to get to those points of view are very, very different. And I think also that the reason I thought you'd be great to do this with and why we'd be a good sort of team is because your background and mine are quite distinct, as in you're a postmodernist, and I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced by postmodernism generally. I mean, I have a lot more reservations about a lot of what's called modern theory. I mean, I guess the starting place. This is what we want to talk about as well. But I guess the starting place, and one of the reasons that I got excited about it, the idea was the Zizek-Chomsky debate that happened recently.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing, is it's like as important, there's two things going on. One, I think these theoretical, philosophical issues are really important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to have a good discussion about them. But at the same time, end of the day, we're all on the progressive side. And so this is a chance for us to try and, figure out, where the common ground is. And I think there's plenty of that. What I'm hoping we can do today is sort of sketch out the areas that we want to cover, and that way, one of the reasons, the good things about doing it live and transparent and visible to people on YouTube is that they can say, well, what about this or that? You need to get that in too before we actually get properly underway. I mean, where do you want to start?
I don't know. Well, so I was thinking about this today, and I think probably one of the I think we could take up, subjects, objects, things to reflect on, but I think it would be good to also, like we were talking about, getting to the theory of it and getting to, what is behind all these kind of actions, whether they're radical actions or radical thought or whatnot, like what's behind this, right? And I guess, the person that kind of comes to the forefront of the mind, and maybe especially because I am in a way someone that is, someone who participates in post-structuralist philosophy and thinking, I think is Michel Foucault is someone that we can look back at and go, hey, because there was a lot of contention. You have people like Jean Baudrillard writing books saying, forget Foucault, and then you have tons of other people citing him in their sources, whether it's anthropological research in Egypt or sociology of cinema, whatever it is,
Sure. Foucault is a really interesting thinker for me because he's someone who I think is really valuable despite the postmodern framing rather than because of it. Because you can look at him in terms of theory and framing and his very difficult and obscure language on occasion,
right.
But it's also grounded in really strong empirical studies.
Right.
Absolutely. Right? He's all about looking at what really happened in prisons, what really happened in the history of the development of hospitals. And so to me, rather than a postmodernist, he's a fascinating theorist of modernity, if you know what I mean. And
no, absolutely.
and that to me is really interesting. And what's interesting is people like, you know, like I think it was Badu, I'm trying to remember, who's basically like, look, actually, he's one of the people who said we don't live in a postmodern society.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're still living in a very modern society, and so Foucault's critique of modern institutions, I mean, he talks about, like, the way I've understood him as always is his sort of, he presents a fantastic history of how the modern institutional setup evolved.
Right.
And you can view that from a really theoretical sort of postmodern point of view, or you can view it as a kind of history and historiography almost. And I get a lot out of Foucault, and I think that there's a lot to be got out of him. But like I said, in my opinion, that's despite the philosophical framing and the difficult language, rather than because of it.
Right,
so
exactly.
I think Foucault would be an excellent place.
Yeah, and because there are also other thinkers that really, you know, they choose to take him, and some people discard him and say, you know, he's not relevant anymore. And I think this is, you know, one question that we can discuss. And again, we would love to hear your comments about it. Is, you know, is Foucault still relevant in a way? You know, maybe we should just leave that for the next session or whatever session we choose, right? But I guess another thing which I would love to also get some feedback on is, you know, what kind of, not only subjects should we be taking, but should we try to look at different thinkers or their thought, or should we look at subjects and kind of, you know, or objects like cultural production or whatever, and look at it from someone's perspective? Like, how should we kind of go about taking this, you know? Because we could go about talking about thinkers and whatnot, but we could also go just behind their thought, what kind of schools, traditions they're from, analyze that, have conversations about that, and see where that takes us. But we could also do, like you were talking about, the first episode of Black Mirror, what was it called? The National Anthem, where
the Prime Minister fucks a pig.
Yeah, exactly. And also discuss those things from these kind of theoretical perspectives. I mean, what do you think?
I kind of like the idea of object-based stuff, because it really gives us a concrete thing to start with, and people who aren't, you know, who haven't spent fucking hundreds and hundreds of hours studying philosophy will have an entry point for it. You know what I mean? They'll be able to relate to the conversation too, and it can be a place for them to start on philosophy, rather than just talking to people who already know who Foucault is. You know?
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, and that's something I think we should really try and take it from basics. Like, assume no prior knowledge, which might make it a bit boring for some people. But hey, man, like, go back to reading your fucking your university readings then, if you're such an expert. Which brings me to another question: do we want to have other people participate, or do we want to keep it just us?
I thought that was something I was thinking about today too, because I don't know. For example, something I've been thinking about lately is kind of, you know, bionic technology and interfacing technology and hardware and software with, you know, the human body. Now, I don't know much about that. I think that's something that could be interesting to discuss, but it could be also interesting to bring in someone that is doing that kind of research to participate in a conversation of kind of like, you know, what are the theoretical assumptions? What's the thought behind this? Where are we going with this? And
so, at other end of the spectrum, like if we were to talk about, say, Marx, right? The level of scholarship that's out there on Marx makes it a little bit. You know, there are people who are real Marx experts, right?
Yeah, right.
Having either of us pretend that we're giving someone the real deal is like, we can give you one version, but we could add a bit more depth. And I've got two mates of mine in Australia who are both philosophers, who I'd like to get in on various things if they're up for it. One is this guy Timothy Rayner, and he's got a blog called Philosophy for Change, which everyone should check out. It's pretty awesome. And he's all about, like, when Foucault met Facebook, really trying to bring especially postmodern philosophy into the digital era, the sharing economy, that kind of really cutting edge, up to the minute stuff. But at the same time, I'd like to bring in another friend of mine, Karl Molotov, he calls himself, and he's just a he's a good old-fashioned Marxist who wants to smash shit up. So, so like I'd like to bring that in, and we can expand it out and make it like a group blog. I think could be even more interesting.
Right, absolutely.
But, if people have any thoughts or want to participate or whatever, they can comment or email us or follow us on Twitter.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I guess just to kind of like frame what we've discussed so far and kind of look at the questions that we're asking. One, what do people out there think would be more interesting? Would you, prefer kind of conversations about certain objects or certain phenomena happening within society today or before or the future? Or would you prefer something that is more based off of kind of philosophical schools or traditions, which already kind of sounds, but nonetheless, we'd love to hear back from you on that. And also, do you think this is something that we should add people? I think Austin and I actually we're pretty in accord with that it would be great to like add people into these conversations, right? Just because if not, it's just having these conversations about certain things, and we do that.
Yeah, it'll be a bit.
Whatever.
That'll be fun, but we might end up going in circles, and it might be good to have someone in to break the circuit from time to time, so we don't have the same debate we've had every time.
Cairo. Right, exactly.
About whether or not huge dicks can walk down the street. Do you want to tell that story? I reckon that's about when this whole idea started. It's 2011.
Yep.
When I was living in like that island on the Nile in Zamalek, in the really posh island on the Nile. And we were hanging out at my place, and I think this is when I really realized how fundamentally different our approaches were. When you said you don't believe in the consistency of reality,
right, or the uniformity of nature, I guess is the way I would put it. And because I remember this conversation, and in a way I believe, since there is no uniformity of nature, right, anything can happen at any moment. And this is something, this is an idea that was expressed by Jean-Paul Sartre in Nausea. And, I just was telling Austin over a couple beers, I think we had, a few in us, and I was explaining how I think, one day we're just going to be walking down the streets and these penises are, that are 10 feet tall are just going to be... Tall. What? Oh, how tall?
I said 6 feet, then you said 10 feet, so I'm like, whatever.
Somewhere around there, right?
16.
And they were going to just be walking around and participating in society, not being harmful or violent at all, maybe just by accident bumping into us, and kind of what would happen? How would we react if all of a sudden our reality was completely dismissed and we have penises surrounding us and just walking and being benevolent,
This is an interesting, like very dramatic, surreal example of a similar point to what David Hume would make. That just because every time we pick up a rock and drop it, it's fallen to the ground, doesn't mean next time it's not going to fly off into space.
Right, exactly.
There is no logical inconsistency in the fact that the laws of nature, which we've discovered just by observation, could change tomorrow. There's no logical problem with that because we have no idea where they came from. We just study them as givens, right? And actually, this would be interesting because one of the things Chomsky says, which is really, which really interests me, is he did a lecture a while ago where he kind of broke off both from politics and linguistics, his two main things, and he talked a bit more about like core philosophy stuff, and he was very, and what he talked about was this idea that the original Enlightenment thinkers already knew what postmodernists are trying to tell them, trying to tell their descendants, maybe forgot it. Right, but the original Enlightenment thinkers knew there is no basis for any of this. Like we've got nothing but intuition, we've got nothing but experience and so forth. And like there's great lines from people like Hume and Locke and all these people we think of as being like who realize. And an important part of this is that the Newtonian physics actually broke the Enlightenment.
Right.
Because before then, and even Newton was part of this, is we want to make a clockwork universe, a clockwork model of how the universe works, right? Like, so God, the great craftsman, has put it all together. But Newtonian physics requires action at a distance. It requires that the Earth is affected by the sun, even though there's nothing in between them.
Right.
right? Which was completely inexplicable until the theory of relativity, which is still not. But what it did was it actually undermined the Enlightenment view of the world as a mechanical system, and
Right.
pushed them into, you know, the existential question was there actually at the heart of modernity from the beginning. And just because people forget that, and like this, and Chomsky's not directing this at the postmodern schools, although he mentions them. He's directing it at like philosophy of mind people, at the science, at people in the sort of sciences who talk about things like gravity as a physical theory, right? You know what I mean? And talk about like
exactly.
they're mechanical. When they what the original thinkers wanted, and well, this is something we should really come back to. Maybe this is after the Foucault episode or before. Should we do these chronologically? Is that what the fuck was I just saying?
We were talking about
the format, and I forgot the content.
No worries. The breaking of modernity through Newtonian law and the development.
Yeah, exactly. But people refer to these things as somehow, you know, relativity and electromagnetic radiation as somehow obvious, and somehow when they're not at all. And the original thinkers who discovered them realized how counterintuitive they are in a sense, because what they had been trying to build was a universe that could be understood by common sense. Right. And common sense means if I punch you, you're going to feel it, like, because we experience being three-dimensional objects in mechanical space and being acted on by pushes and pulls, right? So we can intuitively understand that, and they were trying to use that intuitive understanding to build a model of the universe. And it fell over completely, right? And we've gotten further and further and further from that as science has progressed, right? We're actually at the point now where the idea of unifying the different sciences is basically forgotten. Right? The idea was chemistry was going to be applied physics, biology applied chemistry, and so on up to psychology and sociology. But we've realized that you can't do that. You can't reduce one field to another. We just have all these different tools that we pull, and then we try and see if they fit with reality, and they do or they don't. You know, so
which I think speaks. Oh, go ahead.
Well, see, to me, that's a true modernist's approach, right? So what you can see the postmodernist is doing is renewing that sense of awe and mystery, which was at the core of it, you know, in the 17th century.
Right, absolutely, and that's not to say that it's all like metaphysical or not, because I don't think you know, people that are using post-structuralism or postmodernism as a way of viewing the world are necessarily saying it's something metaphysical. I think, you know, we're just trying to understand all these different dynamics and relationships that may be beyond this whole concretization or, you know, non-abstract formulation of the world, right? So, you know, like I'm saying earlier in the example, like, well, why not? Why can't that happen? Why won't, you know, giant penises be walking around, you know, on the street with us? And in fact, it can happen.
I can't give you a reason why it won't happen, but it's also like, how can you prove that I don't have 4 legs right now? You can't. Because you can only see from here up. But as a practical way of navigating the world, we can't really use that. You know what I mean? Like, I remember that conversation we had that same night.
I disagree, but okay.
And you called me up and you're like, hey, what floor is your apartment on again? It's like, I think it's the 3rd, but if there's no uniformity in reality, maybe you should just try every level and the next building over.
Right.
Because I might be there.
No, it's true. I mean, and in a way, okay, that sounds very confusing within that example, but...
Well, what I'm saying is that everyone has to accept the uniformity of nature to navigate at all. To some extent, you have to work on that basis.
Do you? I don't know if you have to, because, of course, you know, there are all these set things, and, for example, I think that's, you know, these kind of things that we have to agree on are things that we've agreed on to construct reality, right? But, for example, time, you know, we said we would meet up at 3 o'clock my time, 2 o'clock your time. All right, but this is this incrementalization is just the quantification of time. Or, for example, I don't necessarily believe in time. I think it's just a constructed social construction, right? And so with without this, I think it was a way for us to kind of produce a way of measuring certain aspects. And I think the further we go into measuring certain aspects of our life, I think we're going to be faced with many more problems. In fact, this is what I was trying to talk about on this blog post. What if we quantify memories? What happens if memories are all of a sudden measured, commodified, etc.? And but anyway, I think this could be, another conversation.
I think we've laid the ground pretty good.
Right.
Okay, so let's not make any decisions now. Let's leave it to see what people comment, right?
Absolutely.
And then we've put out the question that we want people to address, and they can hit us up on. I'm on Twitter, Austin G Mackle. You on Twitter, Matt? I don't think you are.
Nope, I'm actually not, but I'll set one up. But if not, you could hit us up on...
or they can find you at Patient Zero, Phil. You can run that. We've set up a Twitter account, Patient Zero Phil, Patient Zero Phil at Gmail, if you want to email us with your thoughts. And yeah, I mean, I think the big question we want to ask people is: do we start with Foucault, or do we start earlier with the Enlightenment?
Absolutely.
And any other comments and suggestions, huh? And
absolutely.
And we'll try and meet up again next Monday.
Yep, let's shoot for next Monday, and let's see what you guys say out there, and please comment and make suggestions, because we're really open to this, and we want to hear all of your voices, because I think this is a collective effort in order to understand how we can radicalize thought even further than what we have, right?
And action.
Action.
Let's do the sign off. Let's do the sign off. The one bit we did plan.
Wait, remember? Which was? No, I don't.
I'll give you the I'll type it. Did you see it in the chat?
I don't see it in the chat, actually. I don't even know where the chat is. Wait, it's up here. Okay, give me 1 second. We're still good? Exactly.
Yours is the first line, mine's the second.
All right, well, take it easy.
But take it.
Ciao.